Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
Story 1. The Thing in the Walls. I bought the house because it was cheap. That's usually how these stories start, right? But mine wasn't some centuries-old mansion with a history of murders or a creepy old lady next door. It was a simple two-story home on the edge of Vermont, built in the late 80s. The listing said, minor cosmetic damage. The photos looked fine. The price was almost suspiciously low, $45,000 for what should have been double that. The first night I moved in, everything felt off. Not terrifying, just wrong in that subtle way, like walking into a room where someone was just arguing. The air felt heavy. I brushed it off as exhaustion from driving all day. The strange things began on night 3. I was in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard something moving inside the walls. It wasn't the scurry of mice. I've dealt with that before. This sounded bigger, heavier, like something crawling with deliberate slowness, dragging along the insulation. I froze, my phone light reflecting off the wall across from me. Then I heard whispering. I swear I did. It wasn't loud, more like a low murmur, as if someone was speaking through the drywall, a few words at a time. I pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing. I pulled away. Then, "Don't!" The voice was deep and male, close enough that I could feel the vibration through the wood. I jumped back, heart slamming in my chest. I told myself it was an echo from outside, maybe someone in the yard. But when I peeked out the window, there was no one there. Just the empty yard and the pale light from the motion sensor. That night, I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I checked the walls. Nothing unusual, no holes, no cracks, no signs of animals. I even went into the attic where I found something that made my stomach twist. A small square cutout in the insulation, just big enough for a person to peer through. Behind it, carved faintly into the wooden frame, was a word scratched over and over again. Stay. I couldn't stop thinking about that word carved into the beam. S-T-A-Y. Who was it talking to? Or worse, what was it warning me about? That day I tried to treat it like a bad dream. I ran errands, fixed a dripping faucet, and even played music loud enough to drown out the silence. But the longer I was home, the more I noticed something subtle. The house had its own rhythm. A faint, hollow tapping every few minutes. Breathing drafts that came from nowhere. That night, around 2 a.m., the tapping grew faster, almost urgent. It was coming from behind the closet wall in my bedroom. I got up, flashlight in hand, and pressed my palm against the paneling. Warm. The wood was actually warm. Then the tapping stopped. From somewhere inside the wall, 3 slow knocks answered the touch of my hand. Knock, knock, knock. I whispered, "Hello?" Silence. A chill ran up my spine. I turned a step back and heard a faint scraping behind me, like fingernails dragging down plaster. The noise was moving from the wall toward the ceiling, then across the room. I followed it with the flashlight beam until it stopped directly above my bed. And then, nothing. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was losing it. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe raccoons. I called an exterminator. He arrived that afternoon, a friendly guy named Russ with a heavy flashlight and dust mask. "Old houses can sound alive," he said with a grin, "but I'll take a look." He checked the attic, the basement, the vents. After nearly an hour, he came down, shaking his head. No droppings, no nests, No sign of critters. But he hesitated. There's a crawl space behind the basement wall. Small one. You know about that? I didn't. He showed me. A section of paneling that lifted away to reveal a square hole barely 2 feet high. Cold air drifted from it, thick with dust. Probably just old ductwork, Russ said. But it's weirdly new. Someone added this later. I thanked him, paid, and watched him drive away. Then, of course, I did the stupid thing. I went into the crawl space. It was tighter than it looked, just enough room to crouch and shuffle forward. My flashlight cut through dust that hung like fog. 10 feet in, the air grew strangely heavy, almost humid. The walls of the crawl space weren't raw wood like the rest of the basement. They were lined with plaster, painted the same color as my bedroom upstairs. And there, in the center of that narrow passage, was a small table. On it sat a single object, an old rotary telephone, black and glossy, the kind from the 1950s. No cord, no outlet. As I knelt in front of it, the phone rang. The ring wasn't loud. It was flat and dry, as if it came from far away. The crawl space vibrated with each note. I nearly dropped the flashlight. My brain started tripping over excuses, a prank, a timer, an echo from a neighbor's phone, but none of them fit. There wasn't even a wire. Still, I reached for the receiver. When I picked it up, the line hissed softly, and a man's voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come in." My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, I heard faint breathing. Slow, wet, close enough that I could almost feel it against my ear. Then, very clearly, a second voice, higher, raspier, whispered from somewhere behind the first, greater than, "He's listening again." That was enough. I dropped the receiver, backed out of the crawl space, and slammed the panel shut. I didn't even stay to lock up. I just ran outside and sat in my car until sunrise. When I finally gathered the courage to go back in, everything looked normal. The crawl space was empty. The phone was gone. I should have moved out right then. But fear and confusion can twist your thinking. You start doubting yourself, trying to explain what can't be explained. For a few days, things were quiet. No whispers, no tapping. I almost convinced myself it was stress. Then, one evening, I came home from work and found every door in the house standing wide open. The front, the back, the basement, all open. Not broken, I just unlatched, as if the house had taken a long breath. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old metal. I closed the doors one by one. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped cold. Someone had carved a message into the wall above my bed. The same deep scratches I'd seen in the attic. S-T-A-Y. But beneath it, a second word, new, smaller, written in shaky letters, had been added, inside. That night, I slept in my car. I tried to sell the place. No buyers. I tried to rent it. Everyone who toured it complained of a smell, like wires burning, even when nothing was on. The last night I spent there, I heard movement again. Crawling, whispering, the same voices behind the walls. I turned on my phone's recorder and asked aloud, "What do you want?" The whisper came instantly, greater than company. Something shifted behind the plaster, a slow bulging, as though something was pressing its face against the inside of the wall. Then a sharp crack split the paint. A single pale finger slid through, followed by another, dragging down until it left a long, black streak. That's when I ran. When I came back with the police the next day, the wall was intact. No crack, no smear, just smooth plaster. I moved out the next morning. The house has been resold twice since then. Each time the new owner leaves within a month. I still check the real estate listings sometimes, just to make sure it's not my imagination. The photos change, new paint, new furniture. But I always notice one thing. In the background of every photo, near a vent or corner, there's a faint mark on the wall. A single carved word, just visible if you zoom in enough. S-T-A-Y. Story 2. The door that knocks back. I never believed in the supernatural, at least I didn't until that night in October. I was 22, living alone in a small apartment in upstate New York. My roommate had moved out suddenly, and I'd signed the lease thinking it would be cheap and quiet. It was exactly that, until the knocking started. It began at 2:17 a.m. precisely. I was halfway through a horror movie, the room dark except for the flickering TV. I heard it at first as a faint tapping. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, maybe someone walking down the hall. But then I realized the sound was coming from inside my apartment, from my bedroom door. I froze the popcorn halfway to my mouth. The knocking was slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I whispered, "Hello?" Silence. I got up, thinking I must be imagining things, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The knocking stopped. I laughed at myself, trying to shake the feeling. "It's an old building," I muttered. "Walls creak. Pipes knock. It's nothing." I went back to my movie, but the unease didn't leave me. Around 3 a.m., the knocking returned, louder this time. I could feel the vibrations through the wood floor. I ran to the door, pulled it open, and nothing. Just as I was about to shut it, it knocked again. Inside the apartment, this time. I froze. My own apartment. I was home alone. I walked back, heart racing. Every step made the floorboards groan, louder than usual. The knocking came again, louder, almost impatient. Knock, knock, knock. I tried to reason it out. A draft? Old pipes? My brain playing tricks? Maybe. But then I realized the knocking was perfectly timed. Each knock came a second after I moved a certain distance away from the door, like it was watching me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the wind outside, the faint creak that came from the hallway every few minutes, as if someone were shifting their weight just out of sight. The next morning, I convinced myself it had to be the heat pipes. I went to work, came home late, and tried to forget about it. By midnight, I was reading in bed when something soft brushed against my door. Not a knock this time, more like fingertips dragging across the wood. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. When I got up and opened the door, the hallway light flickered once, then went out completely. The building was old. Outages weren't rare. I grabbed my phone for light and stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw the marks. 3 pale impressions on the outside of the bedroom door, shaped exactly like fingertips. They weren't smudges. They were pressed in, as though the wood had softened under someone's hand. I ran my thumb over them. The surface was still warm. I backed away slowly, phone shaking in my hand. The moment I turned toward the living room, something knocked back. Thump. It came from the inside of the closed hall closet. The same steady rhythm. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. I wanted to leave, but curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, kept me rooted. I edged toward the closet. "If someone's in there," I said, "I'm calling the police." No reply. I reached for the knob and yanked the door open. Empty. Just coats and an old broom. Then the air around me dropped in temperature so fast that I could see my breath. The phone light flickered again, and for half a second, I thought I saw a shape hanging in the corner. Too tall, too still. When the light steadied, it was gone. I slammed the door shut, shoved a chair under the handle, and didn't move for the rest of the night. The next day, I asked the building manager if anything weird had happened before I moved in. He looked uncomfortable. "Not weird," he said, "just sad. The guy before you kept saying someone was knocking at his door every night. We figured he was drinking again." "What happened to him?" I asked. "He moved out," the manager said. Then, after a pause, "Well, he left. The police found his things gone, but the door to his unit was open. The neighbors said they heard banging all night before that. I didn't ask more. I packed a bag that afternoon and decided to crash at a friend's place. But when I went back for my keys that evening, something had changed. Every door in the apartment, the bedroom, the closet, even the kitchen cabinets, was standing open. And written on the inside of my bedroom door, scratched into the wood, were 4 words I didn't want to read: "Don't open for him." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the bedroom door, flashlight clutched in my trembling hands. Every sound outside the apartment, pipes, wind, footsteps, made my heart leap. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the knocking began again. Slow, steady, knock, knock, knock. But this time it wasn't from the door alone. I could hear it inside the apartment, moving. Light taps from the living room, heavier thuds from the kitchen. And then, from my own bedroom door, 3 sharp, urgent raps. I whispered, "Go away." The knocks paused, a long, heavy silence. And then something soft scratched at the wood from the inside of the door. My hands went icy. The sound came closer, like it was pressing against the surface, testing it. I did the stupidest thing possible. I opened the door. Nothing. Just my empty bedroom. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. And that's when I heard it. A whisper right behind me, greater than "You opened it." I spun. Empty room. My closet door creaked. A shadow flickered near the corner. Then it hit me. The knocks weren't random. They weren't just on the door. They were tracking me. Every time I moved, the sound followed. And the whispers had begun repeating as though chanting my name. I bolted for the front door. Just as I touched the handle, I felt it. A pressure on my back, like icy hands pushing me forward. I stumbled into the hallway, yanking the door open, and ran straight into the stairwell. When I reached the lobby, the building was silent. My car was where I left it. The street was empty. I got in, locked the doors, and drove until my headlights caught the sign for a 24-hour diner. I didn't stop until dawn. I never went back. I quit that apartment, moved hundreds of miles away. I changed my number, my locks, my routines. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it in my dreams. A soft tap, tap, tap. A whisper calling my name. And I know, without question, that the door is still waiting. It's always waiting. Knock, knock, knock. Story 3. The reflection that stayed. I found the mirror at a yard sale on the edge of town. It was tall, framed in black oak, the kind of antique that looks heavy enough to anchor a ship. The seller, an older woman with silver hair, told me it had belonged to her late brother. "Are you sure you want this one?" she asked as I handed her the cash. "It's particular." I laughed it off. I just need something for the hallway. She hesitated, then added quietly, "Don't leave it uncovered after midnight." I thought she was joking. That night, I hung it opposite the front door. The hall was narrow and the mirror doubled the space, making my small apartment feel less claustrophobic. When I passed by, the reflection always seemed a little dimmer than the room itself, like a light bulb burning a shade lower on the other side of the glass. Around 2 in the morning, I got up for water and caught my own reflection moving. I swear it moved first. It was small, just the turn of my head, a split second before I actually moved, but enough to make my stomach drop. I stood there for nearly a minute, watching. The air around the mirror felt cooler, as if it were breathing out. "Sleep deprivation," I muttered, and went back to bed. The next morning, I found fingerprints on the inside of the glass. 3 pale smudges where I'd never touched it. I wiped them away, told myself it was residue from moving it, and went on with my day. That evening, when I came home from work, the hallway light was off. I flicked the switch. Nothing. The bulb had burned out. In the mirror's faint reflection, I saw something over my shoulder. A shadow, slightly taller than me, standing where the light should have been. I spun around. Empty hall. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. But a single word had appeared in the condensation along the bottom edge, as if written with a fingertip. "Stay." The word was gone by morning. I told myself the glass must have fogged from a change in temperature, that maybe a pattern in the dust just looked like letters. That lie worked until the 3rd night. It was nearly midnight when I walked down the hall again. This time, the light was on, bright and steady, and I stopped in front of the mirror just to prove to myself that nothing was wrong. My reflection stared back exactly as it should. Then it blinked, once, while my eyes were still open. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. I waited for it to happen again. It didn't. But there was something different in the reflection's expression, a slight, almost sympathetic tilt to the mouth, like it was sorry for me. I grabbed a blanket from the couch and threw it over the mirror. The fabric twitched against the glass as it settled. Not from air movement. There wasn't any. It looked like something inside the mirror had brushed against it. That night, I slept with the hallway light on. The next morning, I found the blanket folded neatly at the base of the mirror. I hadn't touched it. I called the woman who sold it to me. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When I tried again later, the number was out of service. By late afternoon, strange things started happening around the apartment. My phone alarm went off at random times, always 2 a.m., even after I deleted every alarm. My reflection in windows seemed half a second late, always catching up after me. One evening, I came home to find the mirror uncovered again, but now the hallway looked different in the reflection. The wallpaper was cracked and yellowed, the floor darker, warped. At the far end of the reflected hall stood a door I'd never seen before, an old wooden one, slightly ajar. I leaned closer. In the reflection, something moved behind that door. A hand, pale and motionless, resting against the frame as though waiting for permission to come through. When I stepped back, the image blurred, and my real hallway looked perfectly normal again. No extra door, just my breathing, fast and shallow, bouncing back at me from the glass. I tried to ignore the mirror after that night. I covered it again, taped the blanket in place, even dragged a bookcase in front of it. For 2 whole days, nothing happened. The apartment felt heavy, but quiet, and I began to think maybe I'd smothered whatever weird energy the thing had. Then, on the third night, I woke to a noise like soft glass tapping. Tick, tick, tick. It came from the hallway. My stomach dropped. I told myself not to look, just stay in bed. But curiosity has teeth. I crept toward the door and peeked down the hallway. The bookcase was still there, but the blanket had slipped halfway off the mirror, hanging like a curtain. And beneath that strip of uncovered glass, a hand pressed flat against the inside. It wasn't mine. The fingers were too long, the skin colorless and thin, the nails leaving faint scratches as they dragged down the glass. I could see the faint outline of a face just behind it, blurred like it was pressed against a sheet of ice. When I whispered, "What do you want?" the reflection mouthed the same words, a heartbeat before I did. The tapping grew louder, desperate, like knuckles drumming for release. The blanket slid the rest of the way to the floor on its own. Now the mirror showed not my hallway, but the other one, the decayed version I'd seen before. The door at its far end was open wider, and a shadow stood in the gap, waiting. My reflection turned its head toward that door, even though I hadn't moved. Slowly, it raised its hand and gestured toward me. "Come closer." I shook my head and backed away. The reflection smiled, a sharp, knowing expression, and then, with a single step, it left the frame. For a split second, I saw nothing but an empty mirror. Then, behind me, the floor creaked. I turned so fast I nearly fell, but the hallway was empty. Only the smell of dust and something metallic lingered in the air. When I looked back at the glass, my reflection had returned, but it was standing several inches closer than I was, its eyes just a little too wide. That's how it's been ever since. Every day, a little closer. Every night, that faint tapping from the hall. I keep the mirror covered. I've moved apartments twice, but somehow it always ends up where I live, propped against a wall, waiting. Sometimes, when the room is dark, I can see the shape of that other hallway in its surface, faint and patient, stretching far beyond what my eyes should see. And on the nights when I can't sleep, I almost hear a whisper through the glass. The same word written there the first night I brought it home. Stay.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.